So, the back deck panel curves up to shed water more than the front deck panel curves up to shed water. So how am I going to build a jig that will hold my middle deck panel so that the curve in the front matches the front and the back matches the back? So by weighting down this foam board, it conforms to the shape of the front and the back. It has the protective plastic sheeting on it, which will hopefully prevent the epoxy from sticking to it. So I'm going to epoxy one side and all four edges of my deck board, lay it down on top of this guy, and then put the weights on top of it, and let it dry in this particular shape. So my center deck board is not an even multiple of any of my rolls widths. So in this case, I'm cutting the exact width of the deck board out of the roll, and I'm going to be doing 3 layers. There's one at the far end, one at this end, and then in the center it's going to overlap a little bit on the sides, and I'll have to put a few extras in the center to do extra strength there. I'm probably going to be laying down like 3 or 4 layers of this thin woven fiberglass to make up for the bulk of what would have been chop strand mat. Okay, so in addition to the 3 layers of woven fiberglass I have folded up on top of that box, I have 4 of these long 3-inch wide fiberglass tapes cut. That's 2 for each long side, and I have 2 of the short ones, so I'm just going to cover each short edge with a single layer just to kind of hold things together. But it's really these 4 long edges here combined with the whole layer on the bottom here that I'm counting on to hold the shape. Alright, after putting all the epoxy and fiberglass on the board here, I have laid it down on top of the other board, and it might look like I have it backwards because you can kind of see the Lowe's markings there, but I do have the top side of the center board up, and that's from the plastic that I peeled off a different one I put on top just in case it rains, because in Florida it tends to rain every day. So that'll keep the rain off of the epoxy if it does rain. But I'm basically going to let it cure here overnight in this position so that it will take the exact shape of my front and rear boards, so that hopefully the angles of everything will line up when I plop it in the middle.
There's that rain I was talking about.
Yesterday I made the claim that the plastic I peeled off of the foam core board, or the foam insulation board, would not stick to epoxy and would protect this whole thing from rain. Let's see how those claims held up. So all in all, using the leftover plastic that I peeled off of these foam insulation boards as peel ply worked pretty darn well. The only exception is, you can see here these black marks. The ink that comes off the back side of the foam, so you know, things like this Lowe's stuff, when you pull off the plastic, that plastic has that ink on it. On the back side, and so if you lay the back side of that plastic down on top of fiberglass, that ink will transfer to the fiberglass. It doesn't really matter because I'm going to be painting over this whole thing when I'm done with it anyways, but that's something to keep in mind if you're trying to do fiberglass. You want to use peel ply without ink on it. I also have here, at one point I'm reusing plastic that I had used as a drop cloth, and so I have some of my paint that was stuck on the plastic. It pulled off the plastic and stuck to my fiberglass. Imagine a little bit of sanding is going to take care of that. But the actual overall procedure of laying this thing down on top of the board to take on the shape worked out very well, I believe. I'm pretty happy how this turned out. You can see that the back edge there lines up nicely with the rear. The front edge is slightly lower than the front, but the curve is about the same. I'm pretty sure once I put a couple layers, I'm going to be doing a couple layers of woven and then the chop strand mat on the top here. I'm pretty sure that level is going to be pretty darn close. It's not going to be perfect, but I like how the transition is going from more curved on the back to less curved on the front. So I'm pretty happy with how letting this cure on the actual, on top of a foam board, or on top of the actual things I'm trying to match up with worked. Alright, so this board cured, flipped face down, sitting on the plastic on top of a foam board. And the edges where it was definitely touching are super flat, simply because they were pressing against the plastic. There's other areas where you can feel the weave or the woven fiberglass under there where it obviously wasn't touching the plastic. There's a few places where drips have calmed down to the plastic, so you have little flat areas here. There's one area way back here you probably can't really see where there's a wrinkle of epoxy, where there was a wrinkle in the plastic that was on. But all in all, the surface finish is pretty good. It wasn't completely flat against that foam board because I was using the foam board at a twisted angle to kind of get those two edges to line up with my existing my existing front and back deck boards. So I think if that foam board was on a flat surface and this was flattened on top of it and I had more weights on top, you'd have most of the surface being flat like this. And so it's going to take some sanding, probably a little more sanding than if this was sitting and curing with gravity pulling everything down. But it's not bad. Obviously I have some areas on the corners where random fibers just hung out. But I'm going to sand the whole top down, and then I'll be able to work on the other side.